My name is Kael Whitlock, 32 years old from Augusta, Maine. I came home to save my dying mother, but the moment I stepped through our frozen Maine estate's doors, I realized the real threat wasn't her illness. It was the perfect crime my own sister and uncle were about to seal with her forged signature. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that twists deeper than blood. Now, lean in, this family secret is one you won't forget. Welcome back to the story. I hadn't set foot in the Whitlock estate in over 6 years, not since my father's funeral. Not since I left Augusta with nothing but a backpack, a few $100, and a promise to never come back. But that promise dissolved the minute Brenna called and said, "You should come home. Mom's not doing well." Now, standing at the base of the icy driveway, staring up at the sprawling colonial-style mansion nestled in the pines, all I could feel was cold. Not the kind that cuts through your coat, this was colder than that. This was the kind that crept into your bones. The kind that whispered, "Something's wrong." The house looked the same on the outside, white clapboard siding, deep green shutters, and a stone chimney still coughing smoke into the gray sky. But the windows, once lit with warmth and noise and dinners that always ended in shouting matches, were dark and silent. Brenna opened the front door before I reached it. Her smile was tight, rehearsed. She was dressed in a cream turtleneck and wool slacks, like she was heading to a board meeting, not welcoming her only brother home. "Kael," she said, her voice syrup-sweet. "You made it." "Didn't think I'd miss Mom's final act," I said flatly. Her smile faltered for half a second. "Let's not do that. Come in. It's cold." Inside, the house was spotless. Too spotless. The living room had been redecorated in minimalist gray and navy tones. No pictures of us as kids. No trace of Dad's dusty antique clock. It felt less like a home and more like a staged hotel suite. "She's resting," Brenna said, leading me into the kitchen. "She has good days and bad. Today's somewhere in between." "And Uncle Roland?" I asked, "Out running errands?" "Of course." Roland was always conveniently absent when the hard conversations came around. I sat at the kitchen island, taking in the sleek new appliances and cold quartz counters. Nothing about this place felt like the one I grew up in. Not even the scent. It used to smell like coffee and dust and lemon wood polish. Now it smelled like nothing at all. I know it's probably strange to be back. Brenna offered, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Not me, though. No offer for the guest. But I think this could be good for you. For all of us." There it was again. That practiced ease. That smile that didn't touch her eyes. She didn't hug me. Didn't ask how I'd been, she didn't even ask where I was staying. That's when it hit me, this wasn't my home anymore. It hadn't been for years, but the worst part wasn't that the walls were different, it was that the people inside them were, too. The sunroom had always been my mother's favorite spot in the house, walls of glass looking out over the sloping bluff and the river beyond, with sunlight that turned everything gold by late afternoon. As kids, Brenna and I would build forts here with couch cushions while Mom read legal thrillers in her robe, drinking cinnamon tea like it was a religion. Now, the room felt sterile. The curtains were drawn halfway, and the plants Mom once nurtured had been replaced with a single sad orchid that looked fake. A tray sat on the table with 2 mugs, steam curling lazily from each. Brenna gestured for me to sit. "Figured we could catch up." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean now that I'm useful again?" She didn't flinch. "I mean now that you're here. After 6 years of silence, I wasn't sure you ever would be. Thought you liked it better that way." She slid one of the mugs toward me. "I didn't touch it. I know you're still angry," she said, sitting down across from me. "Dad's death was messy. But we all did what we could to keep things going. You left. I stayed. To play house with Uncle Roland?" I asked. Her smile didn't waver, but I saw the spark in her eyes shift. "Roland kept the house afloat. He managed the estate. We almost lost it, twice. You have no idea the pressure I've been under, Kael. Maybe you should have called. We did. You didn't answer. She wasn't wrong. I'd avoided their calls, their emails. But now I wondered if that silence had cost me more than I realized. I didn't come back to argue, I said finally. I came back because you said Mom was getting worse. She is. Some days she thinks I'm grandma. Others, she forgets she even had kids. Brenna's voice dropped. It's been hard. And now, we're making some decisions. Long-term ones. I leaned forward. What kind of decisions? Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, as if making sure Roland or Mom wouldn't appear. The house. The property. It's too much for her. Too much for us. There are people interested in buying. Developers. I felt my stomach twist. You're selling the estate? We're considering it, she said. It's not official yet. But it might be the only way to afford her care. You know she doesn't have long. I stared at her, searching her face for the sister I used to trust. But all I saw was someone rehearsed. Someone with a plan. I looked out at the frozen river, the trees bending with wind. Something told me this wasn't just about Mom's care. This was something else. Brenna had already made her decision. She just needed me to play along, and I had no intention of doing that. It was after midnight when I found them. The house was quiet, too quiet. Mom was asleep, her door creaking softly with each breath of winter wind outside. Brenna had gone to bed hours ago, claiming she had an early morning meeting with the bank. Uncle Roland hadn't come back all evening. I couldn't sleep. I wandered downstairs, following muscle memory through the old house. The floorboards still creaked in the same places they had when I was a kid sneaking snacks past bedtime. I stopped when I passed the dining room, and noticed the light was on. On the table sat a stack of thick manila folders, neatly organized. Topped with a small notepad and a pen. My name wasn't on any of it, but something in my gut said it was meant to be found. I opened the first folder, property appraisal. The numbers jumped out, $2.7 million valuation for the estate and surrounding land, including the bluff, river access, and commercial redevelopment potential. The next folder held a sales agreement. The buyer's name was listed as Eagle Crest Holdings, a company I'd never heard of. The signatures page was blank, no initials, no ink. But the document had clearly been reviewed. Notes in the margins. Highlights. Sticky tabs. Then came the draft power of attorney, my mother's name typed across the top, giving Uncle Roland temporary authority to manage assets and execute financial decisions. It wasn't signed either, not yet. I stepped back from the table, hands cold, breath fogging up as though the room itself had dropped 10 degrees. They were going to sell the house. Not in theory. Not down the road. Soon. Quietly, and they weren't going to tell me. This wasn't just about my mother's care. This was a planned transfer, coordinated, deliberate. They were waiting for something. Or for someone to sign. A part of me wanted to storm up to Brenna's room. Slam the folder down in front of her, and demand the truth. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I slipped my phone from my pocket and took pictures of every page. Front and back. Even the notepad. On it was a note in Roland's cramped script, final review by Monday. Use Mom's hand from old forms if needed. I stared at that sentence like it was written in blood. They were going to forge her signature. My heart pounded. I returned the papers exactly as I found them. Left the room in silence. As I climbed the stairs, my hands trembled, not just with anger, but with something sharper, certainty. This wasn't just betrayal, this was theft, and now that I knew what they were doing, I was going to find out why, because if they thought they could erase me from this family's legacy and walk away rich, they were about to learn who they'd left out of the deal. I didn't wait long. The next morning, I was in the kitchen before either of them. I sat at the table, coffee untouched, watching the clock tick until Brenna walked in, heels clicking against the floor like she owned the place. She paused when she saw me. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said flatly. Lots on my mind. She walked past me to the coffee pot. Like what? The part where you and Uncle Roland are preparing to sell Mom's estate without telling me. Her hand froze mid-pour. She didn't turn around. I don't know what you think you saw, I saw the sales agreement. The draft POA. The appraisal. All of it, laid out like a blueprint for betrayal. I leaned forward. You're not even waiting for her to die before you cash in. She slowly turned around, coffee cup in hand, expression calm but tight. This is what being here for 6 hours does. You start accusing people of stealing. I didn't back down. You were going to forge her signature. She blinked. That's a serious accusation. Then seriously deny it. Footsteps echoed behind us. Uncle Roland entered, scarf still around his neck, carrying a folder tucked under his arm. He looked between us. Something wrong? You tell me, I said. Because I just found the paperwork you were planning to use to cut me out of the estate. And from the looks of it, the deal's already in motion. Roland sighed, setting the folder on the counter like a man placing a chess piece. Kael, it's already done. My stomach dropped. What do you mean, done? The transfer was finalized 2 days ago. Your mother signed it. She couldn't have, she barely recognizes anyone. We have a video recording, Brenna said calmly. She was lucid that day. And the notary signed off. It's legal. Convenient timing, I spat. You've been gone 6 years, Roland said. This house isn't just sentimental real estate, it's a burden. Property taxes, medical costs, upkeep. You haven't contributed a dime. I didn't know I needed to pay to keep my mother's name off a corporate deed. Brenna walked closer. You think we wanted this? That I wanted to let go of the only home we ever had? No. But this was the only way to keep her in care. The only way to stay afloat. That's not what this is, I said quietly. This is about cashing out. You've already got the developers lined up. You didn't call me home because you needed me, you called me to manage me. Roland shook his head. You're angry. I get it. But it's over. The documents are signed. The transfer's done. If you want to challenge it, you'll need a lawyer. I stared at both of them. My sister. My uncle. My family, they weren't apologizing, they were daring me, so I stood, walked to the door, and said the only thing I could, I hope you know what you've started. Because I sure as hell did. The thing about betrayal is that it burns fast, but revenge. Revenge requires patience. After Roland said it was already done, something in me cracked. Not loudly. Quiet, like frost splitting old wood. The kind you don't notice until the whole frame collapses. But instead of storming out, I smiled. You're right, I told them. I overreacted. Brenna's eyes narrowed just slightly. She didn't believe me, not fully, but she wanted to. People like her always prefer the lie that keeps the peace over the truth that starts a war. I just needed time to process, I added. I want what's best for Mom too. That sold it. Over the next week, I played the part they wanted me to play, dutiful son, reformed brother. I brought coffee every morning. I sat by Mom's bed even when she didn't recognize me. I asked polite questions about the sale. I even complimented Brenna on the tough decisions she had to make. She lapped it up, but behind the smile, I was taking notes. Each night, when the house went quiet, I photographed files, logged dates, and recorded phone calls on my burner app. I followed the paper trail back to the notary they used, who, it turned out, had been disciplined before for document fraud. I found inconsistencies in Mom's signature from the video they supposedly recorded. Her handwriting was shaky on her best days, but somehow clean and deliberate in the footage. That's when I knew, they hadn't just betrayed me, they'd forged their way into a fortune. Eagle Crest Holdings was a shell company. A search through land records showed they'd bought up other old estates in the area, always after caretakers took control of someone sick or dying. Always signed over under questionable circumstances. And guess who handled the paperwork every time? Uncle Roland. He wasn't just managing the estate. He was running a scheme. And Brinna. She wasn't innocent. Not anymore. She'd taken her seat at the table. I knew confronting them wouldn't work. They were too polished, too rehearsed. If I went at them directly, they'd deny everything and push me out harder. So I waited. I built my case. Piece by piece, I copied Roland's laptop onto a flash drive while he slept in the den. I recorded Brinna taking a call from someone she called Connor from Eagle Crest, the one where she said, "He'll be gone soon. We'll have a clean transfer by spring." I smiled when she said it. Laughed, even. Played along, because they thought they'd won. They thought the prodigal son had come crawling back, too tired to fight, but what they didn't know, what they'd forgotten, was that I grew up in this house too. And I learned how to lie by watching them. Now it was my turn, and this time, I wasn't leaving without burning the whole thing down. There was one name I kept coming across in the files I copied from Roland's laptop, Dale Huxley. He used to be our family lawyer, the same man who handled my father's will, my mother's medical directives, even our guardianship paperwork when I was 17 and Brinna was suddenly in charge. Reliable. Quiet. And, I remembered, a little too by the book for Uncle Roland's taste, so it didn't surprise me when I found out Dale had quietly resigned just 2 months before the house transfer. His address was still listed on the old firm's website. A quaint brick building off State Street in downtown Augusta, now with a for lease sign in the window. I found him in a cafe 2 blocks away, nursing a black coffee and reading a paperback that looked older than both of us. I sat down across from him without asking. He glanced up slowly. "Kael Whitlock. I was wondering when you'd show." That stopped me. "You were expecting me?" "I wasn't expecting," he said, flipping the book closed. "I was hoping. There's not a lot of justice in this town anymore, but I knew you had more spine than your sister gave you credit for." I slid the flash drive across the table. "You know what they did?" Dale didn't touch it. Just stared at it like it might burn. "I know what they wanted me to do. And why I walked away. Why didn't you report it?" He gave a bitter chuckle. "I tried. But without hard proof, it's just speculation. Roland's a snake, but he's careful. Everything looks legal, on the surface. But it's not, is it?" I leaned in. "You saw the documents. You knew Mom couldn't have signed them. She couldn't tell a nurse what day it was, let alone grant power of attorney." He shook his head. "Roland drafted the paperwork, told me she'd had a moment of clarity. Brought in a notary who barely glanced at her. That's when I resigned. Quietly. Before they could drag me down with them." "You still have anything?" I asked. "A copy, an email, anything?" He hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "In case you ever came asking," he said. Inside was a printed transcript of an email from Roland, an unfiltered message discussing the timing of Mom's signing and how to make it look clean on camera. The language was vague but damning. Why give it to me now? Because someone has to stop them. And frankly, I'm too old and too tired to fight Roland Calder anymore. But you? You're just getting started. I tucked the envelope into my coat and stood. "Thanks, Dale. For not playing along." As I left the cafe, the wind sliced down Water Street. Colder than ever. But inside, something burned, clear, focused. I had what I needed, not just to expose them, but to make sure they'd never do this to anyone else again. The envelope from Dale Huxley was the key that unlocked everything. After leaving the cafe, I drove straight back to the estate, parked a block away, and waited until the lights went out. Brinna's SUV was in the garage. Roland's car was gone. He usually stayed at his condo in Kennebec on weekends. I slipped inside the house like a ghost, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floors I once played on as a child. I went for Roland's den. He always kept a backup drive hidden in the bottom drawer of his antique desk. The drawer was locked, but I'd learned how to pick that old brass latch with a bobby pin and patience. Inside, folders, receipts. And the drive, back in my room, I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting nothing. But Roland had gotten lazy. Or maybe he was just arrogant. A folder labeled Archived Assets had scans of documents tied to the estate transfer. One of them was a scanned medical clearance from Dr. Stephen Markham, dated 2 weeks before the property transfer. I remembered that name. He used to be my mother's general physician. Before he moved to Vermont 3 years ago. My heart pounded. I dug deeper. I found her recent real records, pulled from the patient portal I still had access to as next of kin. The difference was night and day. In the real evaluation, dated 2 days before the forged one, her attending neurologist described her memory as severely compromised, with no reliable capacity to make informed decisions. The forged evaluation, however, called her mentally alert, communicative, and capable. A lie. Signed by a doctor who hadn't been in Maine in over 2 years, they hadn't just pressured her into signing, they'd fabricated the capacity to make it legal. I sank into the desk chair, staring at the glowing screen. My mother's illness had already robbed her of her dignity. Now Brinna and Roland had robbed her of her legacy too. The next file shattered what little restraint I had left, a Word doc with handwritten digital notes, Roland's voice-to-text, it seemed. In it, he rehearsed a conversation with the notary and even dictated a line: make sure to keep the camera above her hands, don't show the shake. That was all I needed. I sent copies of everything to a trusted investigative journalist in Portland, someone who owed me a favor from a job I'd fixed for her husband years ago. I told her to hold the story until I gave the word. I wasn't done yet. Down the hall, I heard my mother coughing in her sleep. The sound twisted something in my chest. I walked to her door, cracked it open, and watched her lying there, frail, peaceful, unaware of the war raging in the rooms around her. I'm going to make this right, I whispered, not for me, for her, and for every truth they tried to bury in a forged signature. It started with a single email. I sent the documents, everything, from Roland's drive, the forged evaluations, the notary transcripts, and the Huxley envelope to the Maine Attorney General's office. I copied the Office of Elder Services and the State Medical Board for good measure. Then I waited. For 3 days, nothing. Just silence. The kind that gnaws at your stomach, makes you wonder if they were too powerful to touch. Brinna walked around the house like nothing had changed. Roland visited again and made small talk about selling off the old sailboat. And I pretended. I smiled. I nodded, but on the 4th morning, the storm broke. 2 plain sedans pulled into the driveway just after 8 a.m. Men in dark coats stepped out. One flashed a badge. The other had a clipboard. I watched from the upstairs landing as Brinna opened the door. Confused at first, then pale, they asked to speak to Roland and requested access to all legal documents pertaining to the estate transfer. I could hear her voice tremble even from the stairs. I need to call my uncle, he's not here, she stammered. We're aware, one investigator said. We've already spoken with Mr. Calder. He's currently being detained for questioning in Kennebec. The air shifted, it felt like a dam breaking. Within hours, more agents arrived. They scanned documents, copied files, confiscated laptops, including mine, though I'd already backed everything up. Brinna tried to maintain composure, but her mask was crumbling fast. By nightfall, the headlines were out: estate fraud in Augusta, family under investigation for forgery and exploitation. Former lawyer tied to suspicious property transfers comes forward. Whitlock family fortune at center of criminal probe. I watched the news from the edge of my bed, my mother asleep behind me, unaware her world was unraveling. Uncle Roland was arrested for multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. His assets were frozen. His firm, once considered a pillar in Augusta's old money circles, imploded overnight. Brinna wasn't arrested, but the stain stuck. She was removed from her position at the local development council. Her name was dragged through every paper in New England. Her face, once poised and polished, now appeared under headlines like The Price of Greed and When Blood Betrays Blood. I thought it would feel like victory, but it didn't. It felt like standing in the ashes of something I didn't set on fire, but maybe should have tried harder to save. The estate went into emergency probate. The sale was voided, but legal battles loomed. Developers threatened lawsuits. Investors backed out. Everything was chaos. I stood in the sunroom that evening, the light soft through the glass. And finally felt it, this house wasn't mine anymore, maybe it never was, but the truth, that belonged to me now, and they couldn't forge their way out of it this time. The fire started just after midnight. I saw it from the motel window, orange flickers across the treetops, dancing like ghosts over the frozen Kennebec River. The old Whitlock estate was up in flames. By the time I reached the bluff, half the house was gone. Fire crews fought the blaze with high-powered hoses, water freezing on contact with the bitter Maine air. But it was already too late. The roof had collapsed. The sunroom was a blackened shell. The bedroom where my mother once read bedtime stories now glowed with the eerie, hungry light of ruin. They said it started in the den. An electrical short, though I saw the look the fire chief gave the investigators. They didn't buy it. Neither did I. The timing was too perfect. The estate had been frozen by the courts just days earlier. The forged documents were officially invalidated. Brenna had vanished. Her lawyer said she was abroad for mental health. Uncle Roland's bail had been denied. And now, with the house about to become state evidence, it just burned down. No. Someone lit that match on purpose, whether it was to destroy documents, erase a legacy, or simply out of spite, I didn't know. Maybe it was Brenna. Maybe someone she owed. Or maybe, in the end, the house itself couldn't bear the weight of everything we'd done to it. I stood at the edge of the bluff, ash floating like snow, the air heavy with smoke and memory. This was where I'd learned to ride a bike. Where Dad taught me to fish. Where Mom told us stories in the sunroom while the storm rattled the windows. And now it was gone. Burned from the map. Just another file in a state investigator's drawer, and I had no one to blame but my family. And maybe myself, because I had pulled the thread. I had exposed them. I had watched the whole thing unravel. And I would do it again. The truth cost me everything, my home, my sister, the last pieces of my childhood. But what they did to my mother was unforgivable. They turned her illness into a business deal. They carved up her dignity and forged her voice onto paper like it meant nothing. I couldn't let that stand. I lit a cigarette I didn't need, just to have something warm in my hand. The fire was dying down now, the house reduced to embers. A cop came up behind me. "You family?" I paused, then shook my head. "Not anymore." He nodded and walked away. As dawn crept over the horizon, I turned my back on the ruins and walked down the icy road alone, because revenge doesn't end in triumph, it ends in smoke, silence, and the kind of peace that never feels like healing. Thanks for listening to today's story. If this tale of betrayal, revenge, and cold justice kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping narrations. What would you have done in Kael's shoes? Would you have exposed your own family? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that cuts deep. Until next time, stay sharp. And trust carefully.